Alright guys, I'm here back with a new video, and in this video I'll be doing a review of the first season of a new reality show, the first season of the Traitors US. Now Traitors is a show that has really been going around having various international versions, and again, we just finally got the US version here. Now this is the third version of the Traitors that I have watched. I've watched Traitors Australia and the Traitors UK, both of which happening at the end of last year, and because of that, I will say, coming into the Traitors US, I was worried I was going to get a bit of fatigue, especially considering this was filmed in the same location and had a lot of the same challenges as the Traitors UK. And straight up, that is the case. At the beginning of this season, I definitely did feel like this was a bit repetitive, like we were just getting the same thing. Now, obviously, if you haven't watched those other versions, you wouldn't have that. And this would be a new, fresh experience, which would definitely elevate the season. However, I definitely felt a bit burnt out early on, though the season really picks up. I think by the time the end of the season, despite me loving the Traitors AU and Traitors UK, and not really knowing if this would be able to match that, I do think it does. I mean, this is just such a fun season of reality television. And to run through why, we'll be talking about the season from beginning to end. So let's start off with the premiere, where obviously the players end up arriving in a Scottish castle. Though this cast ends up being only 20 people, which I believe is less than the other season of the Traitors, which works out considering this is also a shorter season than the other seasons of the Traitors, this being 10 episodes in comparison to the others 12. We do get introduced to the host and Alan Cumming, who I can't believe ended up hosting this show, considering I always looked at Alan Cumming as this pretty prestige actor, and the fact that he went out of his way to do a reality show feels strange to me, but he does do a very good job here. Now, I do think early on he did kind of annoy me a bit in the sense that I think he was hamming it up a bit too much. However, I do think I kind of grew on him as a host as the season went on. I guess this is where I should talk about the cast in general, which this does end up being a weird season where for the first ever season of the Traitors US, they decided to do a half celebrity, half newbie format, which again is just weird, especially considering the two other ones that I've watched have both been all newbie casts. However, to be honest, I mean, that's kind of what caught my attention in the first place with the Traitors. The fact that Arie Fields is going to be on this season. The fact that Rachel Riley is on this season. Stephanie LaGrossa, Cody Calafiore, and these people that I know from Survivor and Big Brother. You also have Brandi Glanville and Ryan Lochte, who are on Celebrity Big Brother. And then you get other people that I didn't know. But still, I mean, like, again, I did know a decent chunk of people on this cast, and that definitely perked my interest to begin with. But I will say, like, getting introduced to the cast here, I did feel like they didn't do a proper job here. I feel like there were a lot of people on this cast I really just did not get a good sense of until essentially around the time that they were going to be booted, if at all. I mean, I do think this does a good job at introducing the big characters, where like Michael gets introduced right away, being this big reality TV super fan and being in love with Arie. We get Rachel calling herself an icon and wants to use her icon status to play the game. We see Andy talk about not being fazed by having to play with celebrities and that no one will see them coming, which, I mean, felt like foreshadowing to a potential win, though that really leads to nowhere. Reza gets this fun character moment of instantly critiquing the house. We get Kate coming off as a big character, and she ends up having a really fun arc on this season, instantly bonding with Brandi Glanville, who also is a big character. Though something I was personally surprised by is the fact that Cody seems to instantly have a target on his back, which, I mean, like, on paper isn't that surprising, though I think the fact that only Cody seemed to have a target on his back and not the likes of Arie or Rachel Riley did feel a bit strange. We obviously get a great introduction to Arie, talking about how she has lost Survivor, but this game is made for her, which it certainly was. Then we also see Christian talk about really wanting to be a traitor, which I wonder what that will lead up to. And this all leads up to the traitor selection, where, again, this is pretty similar to the previous seasons of the Traitors I've watched, where it's just the host walking around, touches someone on the shoulder, that person becomes a traitor. And here we see the Traitors, which I was so happy to see who we got here. I mean, first up, we got a newbie in Christian. Again, fine. Again, pretty foreshown there, though I did find it funny that he, like, instantly smiled as it happened, being, like, so giddy to become the traitor there. We also get Cody, which, again, cool. But, I mean, the biggest one of them all, thank God Arie was a traitor. I really feel like coming into this season, I would have been so disappointed if Arie wasn't a traitor. I feel like Arie just feels so perfect for the show, which is essentially a game that really highlights all the pros that she has in her Survivor game without really having any of the negatives. So seeing her be able to play as a traitor was really surreal here, and it gets more and more surreal as the season goes on. But here we get the reveal that someone will be murdered first night here, which I guess we should talk about the format of this game, which I do really like. I mean, it's essentially a better version of the mole, where I criticize the mole for the fact that I just don't like the fact that, again, the moles cannot be eliminated. I don't like the fact that there's no real incentive for the mole to be caught from a grander standpoint, while the Traitors here really plays out exactly how I would want a social deduction game to play out. Mind you, it is a pretty basic format, but one that I think is very effective. One that does have the Traitors being able to murder someone every night, where that person will be eliminated there, but also that'll be paired up with a banishment, a round where everyone gets the vote, which during that round, obviously the Traitors are eligible for being voted out there, again, allowing the faithfuls the opportunity to vote them out. And this is, for me, the more ideal format for a social deduction game. But moving forward, again, we do still get some more intermingling before the challenge. We do see people being suspicious of Geraldine because of her fidgeting at the traitor selection, which makes her an instant target right away. Though I also found it funny that during this sequence, we see Rachel talk about how Stephanie is the worst liar ever, so she can't be the traitor, which, if you don't know, this was filmed immediately after Snake in the Grass, which was a one-episode social deduction game that involves Arie, Rachel, and Stephanie, to which it very much seemed the case that they were working together throughout this entire season, which it seemed like that greatly played a factor in that. Though during that game, Stephanie was the snake, the equivalent of the traitor in this game, and through that she played abysmally. So it is funny that Rachel's bringing in that info into the Traitors here. Also here we get Ryan Lochte getting this bit of a dodo edit with him getting this doofus music as he's walking around, and he talks about how his goal is not to really play the game, but instead to look for a hidden door, which is all really funny, but this really ends up being the bulk of Ryan Lochte's content on this season. Though interestingly here, we do also see Rachel talking about how she knows that Cody is a traitor, which, I mean, is a pretty good read from Rachel here. The one that, for some reason, she just kind of neglects for a while. Either way, we get to the first mission, and straight up, I always found the missions in the Traitors to be really boring. I still found that to be the case here, especially considering it's the same challenges as Traitors UK. I just find these to be a massive waste of time. Now, I get for some of the audience that they watch for the challenges, they need something like that to be going on. However, for me, I just find them really boring, and I don't need them. We're here, we get the return of the Burning Man challenge. That was also the first challenge in the UK version, and again, it was mostly boring. And the only real intrigue here comes from Reza getting upset at his team, and through that puts a target on his back. Though really this challenge played out like literally 1-for-1 as the UK challenge, with the second team finishing at the very last second. So again, kind of boring. But then we get to the car ride, which, again, this is a major aspect of the Traitors, where on the way to and back from challenges, they are obviously put in a car to drive them back, but through that, they're all in random groups to where they can talk to each other. Here, us having 4 random groups of 5, and these usually play a major factor into votes, where it ends up being the most blatant alone time for these players, which they can use to strategize and speculate about the Traitors. But following this, we do see the players eating dinner, which felt weird, as I don't think we ever see this ever again. But during this, we do have the Bravo Alliance forming, this alliance between Reza, Brandy, and Kate, that really felt like it was set up just for it to be taken down here, as this all leads up to the eventual traitor meeting at night. Here we see their meeting room, which ends up being similar to the UK version, which I will say I always haven't liked. I mean, I always found that weird. They're just like standing around a well, which I believe is a reference to something else, but I mean, it's still, I've always liked the Traitors Hate You version of this better, where they're like just sitting down. I always found that more visually appealing, but here we get some great reactions to finding out about the Traitors here. Arie and Christian meeting first, where Arie is instantly talking about how she suspected that he was a traitor, and talks about how he has labradoodle energy. But also we get Cody walking in, with Cody being really happy to see Arie, but not Christian, where we had been building up this throughout the episode about how Christian really annoys Cody, which I guess is this dynamic that they wanted to exploit here, but really doesn't end up amounting to much. But again, we have the decision on who to murder, where we instantly have talk about keeping Michael around for some reason, which like is never properly explained here, though becomes pretty evident moving forward. But again, like the main targets here obviously end up being that Bravo alliance of Kate, Brandi, and Reza, where we also get talk about wanting to create chaos while also wanting to split up the majority. And here we really get a lot of insight into Cerie's point of view, where they're talking about how she just wants to go with the group until she's targeted, to which that's when she's going to play more aggressively. Obviously optimal play, and really just this season, I think in retrospect, is really just showing you how to play a traitor, with Cerie being the person to showcase that. But eventually we do see that they decide to murder Reza. And Reza is someone that I was kind of disappointed to lose first here. I feel like Reza could have been such a great character. Really, all these Bravo reality stars are obviously Bravo reality stars for a reason. All of them being great personalities. And Reza was someone that I think was a bit more distinct. Where I think like in comparison to Kate and Brandi, I feel like they were relatively similar. Well, I feel like Reza was a different character. And one that was definitely disappointing to lose first here. I think he definitely could have brought more to the show, which makes it so underwhelming that really had such a minor role on the season. Now, technically, the murder isn't revealed until episode 2, where it is there where we get the first breakfast, which has the players entering in groups, where through this will reveal who was murdered the previous night. And I'll say, I never liked how UK and US now do their breakfast in comparison to AU. I always found AU to be a better format, where in AU they go in one by one instead of in batches here. Well, also in AU it's a much larger room, while here it feels pretty cramped, and I feel like that's always been weird visually as well. Another aspect of the breakfast I don't like, and really this goes for all the versions, is usually the last person to go in was the other person that was up for elimination from the Traitors, which in essence, doesn't that spoil that person isn't a traitor? So that is something that I get what they're doing, obviously for suspense for a TV show, but I do think that's something that should definitely be fixed moving forward, especially if they're going to have multiple seasons. But here we get some of these set up for the following round, with Cody starting to worry about Brandi, and also we get Bam, who barely gets any content. His bit of content here is talking about liking Christian, which might play a factor later on. Now moving forward, we do get a flashback showing the Traitors deciding, which eventually leads to us seeing the murdered open the letter that reveals that they are murdered. And I really don't like this aspect of the format either, it being something that, again, kind of takes away the suspense of this sequence, where once a player sees the letter moving forward, they're obviously going to know that, oh, that means I'm eliminated. And with that being off camera, I always found that being really strange, the fact that we don't get to see their genuine initial reaction to this. But here we see Reza's murder really cause Michael to become a major target here, where I guess Reza and Michael had fought previously at the challenge, and through that, Geraldine and Steph decide to target Michael right away, with him being the prime target for the upcoming banishing. However, we do also see the likes of Christian, Quentin, and Kyle talking about Geraldine being a potential target, with Christian really playing hard here, and him really campaigning, going around to everybody, during which we get a confessional talking about him wanting the group to make decisions to keep the suspicion off of him, which is really strange considering he's literally the one that campaigned the most for Michael. Seemed like really sloppy play, and we do get people talking about how he's a bulldog and that's a red flag, but it really doesn't end up leading to anything, surprisingly, where he ends up making it really far without any true suspicion until his own mess up towards the end. But again, ends up being really sloppy play from him here, where this just causes him and Michael to be associated as traitors. So Geraldine being one of the ones that mention Michael's name, this ends up causing this weird rivalry between Geraldine and Michael, with them being the two targets for this round, and Michael now learning about Geraldine coming after him, which leads to him really sloppily scrambling to try to get Geraldine out, which is again, also bad play from him, to which we end up leading to the next mission, again another pretty boring one. But during it, in the middle of it, we literally see Michael campaigning to the other players as the challenge is going on, which is even funnier considering Geraldine was in his own team. But this ends up really sketching out other people to further think that he's a traitor. But here we see Brandi trying to be a big influence here and trying to target Michael, and also being an anti-Christian figure, though also surprisingly calls out Cerie, where this really ends up being the only time that someone genuinely seemed to think that Cerie was a traitor, with her estimations being Cerie, Michael, and Christian, again being only one off, which is pretty good play. The only issue is that she decides to tell Cody this, which instead ends up putting a massive target on her back there. But coming into the round table, again, it does become between Geraldine and Michael. But here we do get a pretty confrontational round table, where Michael really calls her out for targeting him, and really ends up coming off as a loose cannon here, even calling himself a loose cannon. And this is all really funny considering like Michael and Geraldine are literally sitting next to each other, which was funny. But Geraldine really doesn't end up fighting back, talking about how she shuts down under confrontation, which I did feel for her here, as she does end up being voted out here in a relatively close vote. It is 11-8 vote, but obviously she ends up being a faithful. And following this, we do get the traitor meeting, where this episode does end on the cliffhanger of Cody revealing to Christian and Arie that Brandy has called them out, which, again, obviously they're trying to imply that they're going to murder Brandy, though they don't. I mean, at the beginning of the next episode, we see it transition to Bam instead, talking about, again, once again wanting to cause chaos, which felt like a really random pick, though that's kind of the point. And obviously Christian struggles with that decision, though it does end up going along with it. And with that, let's talk about the two boots here. First up, we got Geraldine, who again, like, was there. I mean, one that didn't get that much screen time, and really most of the screen time that she got was due to her being targeted. She seemed like a nice enough person, but again, not really someone I have much opinions on the show. And really the same thing goes for Bam. Bam was barely there. Really his only content was him talking about his friendship with Christian, only for Christian, then cut him. So again, two really underdeveloped figures on this season. Here, episode 3, the next day, we get to breakfast where we, out of nowhere, get Azra being talked about, with her talking about how she's laying low and making others targets, which I wonder if that's going to lead up to her being eliminated. But here again, we see Christian being really sloppy in his play here, really talking a lot about what the traitors could be thinking, which just, again, is super suspicious, but it seems like no one really picks up on this outside of Arie. Now here we do see Michael still being targeted by Brandy and Kate, with Kate also targeting Christian out in the open, leading to a minor argument between the two, during which Azra and Angelica, who, again, were barely on the show before this, end up walking away from it, talking about not wanting to be in drama and talking about working together, again, obviously setting up their alliance just for them to be split up. And the next day we get to the next mission, which ends up being this music task that was also in the UK, which I also found super boring, but for some reason Rachel knows all these songs super well, which I found funny. But it's followed up by, again, Kate and Brandy talking about the traitors, which is funny considering they have the most accurate read in the game at this point, though instead everyone else is talking about voting out one of Kate or Brandy. And it's during this that we do hear Arie talking about wanting to protect Michael as he's a shield. Something that the traitors end up doing really effectively on this season is keeping around these big shields for them. That allows them to easily navigate through the game. This all leads up to the round table, where instantly we see Quentin targeting Kate, which I haven't talked about Quentin up until this point in the review, which I love Quentin on this season. Again, it is so funny how bad Quentin is at this game and how bad his reads are, to where almost every single time he speaks on this season, it's him having a bad read on the game and thinking the wrong person's a traitor, which is so funny to me. But here, once again, we do get Kate and Brandy fighting against Michael, to which I will say I don't think Brandy had a good look here, like calling him out about his anxiety, and probably took things a bit too personal, which, I mean, that's Brandy Glanville for you. But this does lead up to Brandy being voted out, which is a pretty big move here, one that we don't get full explanation of on their show. Now, obviously, it makes sense that the traitors were targeting her, though again, the actual vote off itself was never fully explained. But Brandy does have a great exit here, calling out all the faithfuls and calling them idiots. Again, it's really, really fun. But then we get to a pretty big moment. I think the moment where my interest in the season started to pick up, something that we haven't seen before, in the fact that as Kate gets up, something falls out of her skirts, to which Stephanie notices it and picks it up, walking away, revealing that it's a paper that has Shelby's name crossed out and Amanda's name and also the word murder, which, first up, I mean, like, how insane is it that you're actually writing this down? Mind you, we did see this scene earlier where it was Kate and Brandy speculating over who they think the traitor could be, but again, like, why are you writing this? But also, really fun here, this adds this really fun dynamic to the show here of Stephanie now thinking that Kate is a traitor and approaching Arie and telling Arie about this, who is an actual traitor, but now Arie having the information to frame Kate, but also doing so would put a target back onto Arie, with them knowing that it would have been one of Stephanie or Arie that was in on it. So again, like, I feel like this is a really fun, interesting wrinkle to the game here that we haven't really seen before. Episode 4 does start with the traitor meeting, where Arie does tell the others about the letter, and do think about the possibility of taking out Shelby or Amanda to go along with that list. Though again, it's just all sloppy play, as again, if you do end up voting out Kate and she turns out to not be a traitor, that's a pretty bad look for Arie. Though really the target here seems to end up landing on Azra, as Azra and Kyle had a minor argument at the round table and then wanting to pin it on Kyle, so we do have Azra being murdered. And with that, let's talk about the two boots here, starting off with Brandy, who again was incredible TV. Again, I think Brandy Glanville is great TV on really every show that she ends up being on. Again, really fun, loud character that was disappointing to see go home so early, though really, again, like I feel like her and Kate are kind of similar-ish characters to where it wasn't like a total loss. But then we get Azra, who, again, was there, barely on their show. I know nothing about her outside the fact that she had this alliance with Angelica. Again, not really too much to say about her. Now moving forward, again, a lot of the focus ends up being around Stephanie telling the others about the note, which ends up furthering this target on Kate's back. Though this does take us to the next game of, again, another one from the UK version of this like match game that has a group of players on this like spinning wheel thing. And again, not too much of a note here, though it is here where we finally get more content about Andy, with Andy talking about their wife and how they're having a kid on the way, which ends up making them a lot more sympathetic of a figure here. Though following this, we get the vote clearly being between Michael and Kate. Though we do get a bit of a red herring here in Kyle starting to suspect Stephanie. Though we do get a bit of a red herring here of Kyle starting to suspect Arie, to which Stephanie ends up telling Arie about this. Again, clearly Stephanie and Arie being very close, both from Stake in the Grass, but also just from Survivor, to where I believe they've been friends in the years since. So that really ends up backfiring on Kyle here. But, I mean, like, really, I found this following roundtable to be mostly boring. I mean, it was a pretty standard affair here with a vote between Michael and Kate, with Michael being the one to finally take the fall here. Which through this leads to Quentin now thinking that Kyle is a traitor, because that's Quentin for you. Now, obviously, we do get the traitor meeting here as well, with Cody talking about struggling with this traitor role, all while being annoyed that Christian isn't struggling at all, which I will say, I did get spoiled in between episodes here of the fact that someone left unexpectedly, and seeing this moment from Cody did kind of worry me of like a potential Cody quit because of like the struggle of being a traitor, though that doesn't happen, though I do think it leads to probably some like incorrect decision making from Cody that we see moving forward. But this also ends up just playing into this following murder here, where Arie wants to target Ryan, secretly to her wanting to split up Cody and Ryan, as I guess they're really close, to which Cody gets upset at the fact that she's accusing him of having out of the game relationships, though really that is the way that this ends up playing out, despite Cody trying to fight back against it. And with that, let's talk about the eliminated players. Starting off with Michael, who again was great TV. I mean, a really chaotic figure in these first few episodes. Again, terrible player. I mean, one that really played extremely sloppily throughout it and really just put this target of being a traitor on his own back, but still a fun character nonetheless. And then we got Ryan Lochte, who, again, was barely on this show. I feel like the bulk of his content was in that episode 1 scene of him being portrayed in this doofusy way. Though he did get a decent amount of confessionals, where in those confessionals, he had this, like, really opposite energy to how he was in the real-life game, where, again, in the game, he was very subdued, very chill. In the confessionals, he was a super high-energy guy. Again, I always found that funny, but, again, not really bring too much to the show. But that brings us to episode 5, where we do start off with the breakfast, where there we do see Rachel and Kate starting their rivalry, which ends up being a major storyline across this season, one that was really fun to watch, and one that really, to me, felt like it brought out this old Rachel that we knew. Also during this breakfast, we do see Arie once again getting great content, and her pointing out both Cody's fidgeting and Christian's bad acting, really making it clear that Arie probably would have dominated even if she wasn't a traitor here, instantly picking up on all the tells from her fellow traitors, though. This is where we do get this big moment for Cody's game, something that ends up blowing up his game here, and the fact that he decides that after the reveal that Ryan has been murdered, to go to Kyle and tell Kyle that Ryan thought it was him, which is just super sloppy play. Again, very different from the Cody that we've seen on BB16 and BB22. And to be fair, Big Brother is a very different game, and one that we do see Cody excel at the elements of the game that would propel him in Big Brother, where it did seem like he built very strong social relationships where people loved him in the house. But again, in a social deduction game here, this just ends up being a play that really just backfires on him, where he thinks that he's building trust here by telling Kyle that Ryan was coming for him, but instead this just comes off super sketchy, and the fact that Ryan Lochte of all people is telling people who he's targeting, again, that just feels very bizarre. And through that leads to Kyle now really targeting Cody. However, it doesn't blow up on him right away, as again, most people actually believe Cody in this situation and do want to target Kyle instead, but considering the eventual elimination of Kyle being banished, that ends up pretty much solidifying that Cody must be a traitor in that situation, to where they follow up on this 50-50, which again, I just think overall, really sloppy play from Cody. Again, just this initial statement, that's just so unbelievable, but then also the follow-up later on just makes it so that he's primed to be taken out the following round. Now, the actual challenge here ends up being pretty boring, one that has them solving riddles in a cathedral. Not super interesting, though one of the teams really sucks there. But really, again, here we do see Kate being a big target. But at the same time, Kyle becomes a pretty big target, to which Arie decides to inform Kyle of this, to where Kyle doesn't really reciprocate any information back, leading to her being solidified and taking him out. Where again, it just felt like everyone was kind of thinking Kyle was a traitor at this point, where we do see Kyle scramble at the last second, telling Andy about what Cody did, though really this ends up all being for naught, where Andy literally starts the round table saying that they're coming for Kyle, which obviously alerts Kyle to the fact that he's pretty much screwed. And through that, Kyle ends up directly coming for Cody here, which I find it funny that Kyle, as part of his evidence that Cody must be a traitor, is saying that he's playing different from how he played in Big Brother, because now he's playing the safest, most cautious game, which is like, that's almost exactly how he played on Big Brother. But here we also see Rachel and Stephanie getting into fights with Kate, to where Kate literally says F you to Stephanie, which was funny. But by the time of the vote, again, it's Kate or Kyle, but Kyle ends up being voted out, revealing himself to be a faithful, which in turn, again, really puts this target on Cody. And while you see Cody trying to do some damage control, it does feel pretty ineffective here, with like people like Steph being super resolute in the fact that Cody is a traitor. But then coming into the traitor meeting, we do get this big reveal here, something that was really strange to me, where we get the surprising departure that I talked about earlier, in the fact that Amanda gets announced to having had to leave due to things out of her control, which, again, weird that's done so abruptly here, and with Amanda also being like a nothing character. But this leads to the traitor meeting, where we do have Arie and Christian talking about what a mistake Cody had made. But the episode ends on this cliffhanger as someone enters and Cody being shocked, which, I mean, like, obviously it's Alan. Like, I don't know why that was considered as a big shock, but either way, let's talk about the eliminated players here. First, starting off with Kyle, who I thought was pretty interesting TV here. Again, being a guy that I knew nothing about coming into this season, but one that approached this game in a pretty interesting way, where he kind of came off like very sketchy, where everyone was literally able to call out his tactics in the game. And while they thought it was because he was a traitor, it turns out it's not. But yeah, like, he definitely does come off pretty schemy through his run here, though I did think he had a pretty interesting role to play, especially leading up to the downfall of Cody. And then we get Amanda, who, again, just left, and I have nothing to say about her. She barely got any screen time, feeling like she was almost purple just due to the fact that she ended up leaving. And again, because that don't really have much to say about her. But then we get to episode 6, where, again, here we get the reveal from Alan that there will be a twist that we've seen on every other season of the Traitors. Instead of murdering, they will instead put 3 people on trial for them to be murdered the following round. I always hated this twist. I mean, this just really feels like a dumb non-elimination episode, which, I mean, it makes sense if this was here because Amanda left, though, to be honest, I wouldn't even put my money on that, as the Traitors just in general does have some wonky aspects of its format towards the end that I never particularly liked, that we will talk about. But again, this just seems to be a mainstay on the show. One that I always found it weird how, like, the Traitors act as if this is a good thing for them, when in reality this is just them not being able to murder someone, though it does allow them to create more chaos, where here we do see them pick Kate, Rachel, and Angelica for death row, obviously furthering this rivalry between Kate and Rachel, while also having Angelica as this easy person to murder the following round to continue that rivalry. Again, a pretty good plan here, though there obviously becomes a slight wrinkle later on. But here we get to the breakfast, where at this point Kate fully wants to quit the game and talks about how she's being held hostage in the game, which I always found super funny, and this ends up bringing a really fun dynamic moving forward of Kate just simply not wanting to be there. But also here we get another big fight between Rachel and Kate, where Kate tells Rachel, "I wouldn't pick that outfit, so I don't trust your judgment," which was a funny line, though. Here we finally get introduced to the Andy-Arie relationship, with Andy talking about how close they are to Arie, which to me, this really screamed out to me as Andy being the person that takes the Traitors to the end and ends up being blindsided by them, which obviously comes to roost. Though eventually, obviously, we get the reveal that no one was murdered, and that Kate, Angelica, and Rachel are on death row, leading to Rachel freaking out. But following this reveal, we do get a lot of talk about how people think Rachel is a traitor and how she put herself up, which, to be fair, that is a very Rachel move to make. And we do get a fun moment from Kate, literally just yelling out that Rachel is a traitor. Though it did seem like the target was still on Cody. Though through that, we get talk from Quentin about wanting to keep Cody around, which continues these bad reads from Quentin. Next up, we get to a mission that was kind of strange, of them having to roll barrels that were worth varying amounts of money, though there were also armory barrels where if those end up making it to the end, then there will be a chance to go to the armory. A new addition to the game that I always really hated, where the armory allows there to be essentially a random draw for who gets safety from murder at night. Something I always found strange is the fact that I believe the way that it works is that if someone is murdered while holding the shield, then they are obviously safe and there will be no murder, which I really don't like how that plays with the numbers of the people left in the game. I feel like it should be instead that the traitors will then learn that that person has the shield and instead have to target someone else, as really instead this ends up just giving implicit immunity, or at least you would think so, to everyone in that group, though really we don't see that truly becoming the case moving forward. But also, I find this power to also be just like very lackluster in a sense that I feel like it also should carry over to the banishment as well, which was something that was done on the Traitors AU, though for some reason in UK and US it's not, which again, I feel like that kind of makes this power a bit more useful to everyone instead of just the faithful. Though to be fair, I guess the Traitors probably have enough of an advantage by this point in the game. But here we see Arie being the one to get the shield, starting his amazing streak on this season of literally getting it every time. But Rachel doesn't get it, obviously leading to her being upset. And really the reveal of the armory here does start to have Rachel cracking a bit and her really going all out during the challenge to try to save herself. Though again, it's all for naught here. But through Arie getting the shield, it really does open up the field for the Traitors to banish whoever they want, even though they don't know that, but they still end up taking the risk anyway. But also during the challenge, we do see Kate really just sabotaging the team by throwing barrels away, which is funny. And through that, we do get this debate of voting out Kate, despite people thinking that she's faithful. But this all leads up to Christian talking to Arie, with them agreeing that they need to vote out Cody here, as he obviously has a target on his back. And again, this is something we've seen in other versions of the Traitors, of two of the Traitors eventually ganging up on a third one that has a target on their back to boost their own credibility. And again, this ends up working out pretty effectively here, where Cody is a clear target here. And at the round table, we do get a pretty fun fight between Cody and Rachel. And we do end this episode on this cliffhanger of Arie saying she doesn't think Kate or Rachel are the Traitors, to which Cody then asks her who she thinks it is, which she doesn't even answer in the following episode. But obviously, we get to the vote where Cody is voted out pretty overwhelmingly here, with the only people to not vote for him being Shelby, Kate, and Quentin. Though interestingly, as Cody gets eliminated here, he reveals he's a traitor, and in confessional says that Arie is really showing you how to play this game, which again really feels like this massive through line of this entire season. With Cody being banished here, this does cause Shelby to start have a target on her back, considering she supposedly was close to Cody, and also people noticing that she wasn't super excited when Cody was eliminated, making her a clear target moving forward. Though this leads up to a traitor meeting where instantly they agree to keep Kate, though the vote between Rachel and Angelica ends up being pretty close, which again, we get a lot of talk at the breakfast about how Arie is confident that it'll be Kate, as it'll be a bold pick to pick Rachel or Angelica with them having the chance of getting a shield. Though again, we see them taking the risk anyway, murdering Angelica, with them seeming to have no qualms about it. But again, let's talk about the boots. Again, Cody, I thought he was great TV here. I mean, Cody was really interesting to watch him play as this traitor, again, this role that is not really the type of game he plays on Big Brother. Now, there are aspects to it. Obviously, on Big Brother, he does play with a lot of secret alliances, though I do feel like the Traitors is really on another level, where Cody doesn't really play this like super cutthroat backstabbing game, really the opposite of that. So him having to play as a traitor here, him having to constantly backstab these people that he is close to, ends up being a really interesting dynamic here. And we got Angelica, who again was there. I'm really not much to say about Angelica. She was present when she absolutely had to be, and then when she wasn't, she was barely on screens. So again, she seems like a really nice person, but not really too much to say about her. But following this, we get to a much shorter round of gameplay, where again, episode 7 ends up being a pretty jam-packed episode, again, having the banishment and the traitor meeting of one round, and also entire another round within its runtime. But here, Shelby gets a lot of content, obviously being this clear target at this point. And really, there was no real detracting from Shelby being voted out here, where she does eventually get voted out in a near unanimous vote. But she starts to get some decent content here, talking about her daughter, and we do get this nice moment of Arie feeling bad for her and reaching out to her, which again, I think it really just shows you how great Arie is here. And also showing you like why people believe her, and the fact that she just seems to be this genuinely nice player, but one that just has this killer instinct. And again, instantly we get the setup of Shelby and Kate being the only two not in the clique, and through that our targets, with again Quentin still wanting Kate out, which again, still, that's Quentin for you. Now we do get a challenge that I thought this was pretty fun. That, again, the actual challenge itself was kind of lame, and the fact that it's literally just them having to notice the differences in the room. Though what does make it fun is that the players really suck at it, with us getting 3 teams, with only 2 teams getting a singular point, while Arie, Rachel, and Andy literally get 0 right, to which they have a really fun reaction to. So again, that was a fun little challenge. The remaining guys all get grouped up in the same team, in Arie, Christian, and Quentin, and they end up winning the visit to the armory due to being the quickest, to which this leads to Quentin saying "so wrong, but so fast," which again, that seems pretty indicative of his game. But here we see Arie gain the shield for the 2nd straight time. Now here we do get a bit of drama from the fact that Stephanie ends up mentioning to Shelby that Arie was disappointed that she didn't become a traitor, which does lead to Shelby spreading this around and causing some minor doubt, particularly with the likes of Andy, though Arie is able to stop that almost instantly. And again, coming into a roundtable, there's never really any doubt for me that Shelby was going to be the boot. Though finally, we do see Kate trying to sabotage herself and trying to get herself voted out over Shelby. Though again, it's ineffective here. And when we do see the reveal that she is faithful, we do get a lot of people feeling genuinely awful that they did so, with Shelby being a single mother and probably needing the money more, and which does lead to another fight between Kate and Rachel, with Kate really blasting the group for getting Shelby out. Though this all leads up to the traitor meeting, where the episode ends on the reveal that no one is being murdered tonight, and instead they will have to make an offer to another player to become a traitor. Again, something that we have seen in the past, though I will say I did find this very strange that we're doing this so late in the game, where we're doing this at the final 8. Which essentially means that at this point, that the traitors only need to get through one more round until they just outright have the majority, which kind of feels a bit too overpowered in my eyes. And really at this point, I never really doubted the traitors were going to win. Before moving on, let's talk about the boot in Shelby, who, again, wasn't really that present on this season, not until her last couple episodes, though, again, she came off as very likable, has a sympathetic background, but ends up being kind of screwed over by being lumped in with Cody, who ends up being confirmed to be a traitor, and through that, people just assume that she would be a traitor as well. But yeah, at least she tried at the end. I mean, credit to her for that, but again, never seemed to be too effective in the game. But now let's move on to episode 8, where again, we get Arie and Christian debating on who to pick as a traitor, to which they end up picking Arie, which he ends up agreeing to join, leading to this really fun reaction as they see that he has done so, with Arie really coming off as a character in these last few episodes, where I think up to this point, I felt like Arie was like not super present on the show, and even when he was, it didn't seem that interesting. But now with him becoming a traitor, I really feel like he was put into these more interesting situations, and still starts off with the breakfast, where this ends up being insane here, and really starts to be this downfall for Christian's game, where Christian decides to, out of the blue, just announce that he was recruited to be a traitor and turned it down, which is like, why are you doing this? Now, we do later see Alan come in and never mention this, to which I feel like if they knew that he was never going to mention it, this is just completely an asinine move. Now, if they didn't know, I can at least see some merit to it of Christian trying to get out in front of it and trying to use it to his advantage, though really just as a whole, it's really bad, just really sketchy that he does this, making him come off as even more of a loose cannon here, and really solidifying Arie and Arie together to where they clearly plan on taking out Christian when they eventually get the numbers. Though also here we get Quentin being Quentin, where after Kate and Rachel argue again, Quentin has this master theory in the fact that they both must be traitors, which is like, how? Like, how is that your interpretation of this? Now we do get a challenge where they split into 2 teams for this like weird escape room style challenge in a cabin in the woods, and I really found a lot of this boring, though. Again, we get another trip to the armory where Arie wins it for a 3rd straight time, which is insane. But through that, it allows the traitors to really murder whoever they want, now with the knowledge that none of the faithfuls have it. But here we do see Arie and Christian decide that Rachel and Stephanie should be the targets, which is definitely bad for Arie in the fact that obviously these are 2 people that Arie has out of the game relationships, and through that she instead wants to vote for Kate, though she does seem to eventually go along with the plan, where we get to the round table, which ends up being a really emotional one here, where we do see a lot of Kate and Rachel going after each other, though Andy eventually reveals that they don't believe Rachel, and this leads to Rachel realizing that she's the target, leading to her being upset at Arie, and Arie seeming genuinely hurt by Arie, which, I mean, again, just really shows you how great of a game Arie was playing at this point. And we do get some great moments as Rachel is voted out here, with her arguing with people as they give their explanations, and her having a Brandy Glanville style exit here. So again, fun run from Rachel. This leads to some drama with Andy storming off and ends up being consoled by Arie. We also get Steph and Christian fighting over him having voted out Rachel. But this leads to Christian now being the clear target, with pretty much everyone talking about how he is the traitor now. With the episode ending here, Arie talking about how Christian needs to be banished. Now, at the beginning of episode 9, we do get the traitor meeting where Christian is really gung-ho about wanting Steph murdered, and Arie obviously doesn't want to, though it ends up going through. And with that, let's talk about the two boots. Starting off with Rachel, who, again, was just incredible TV. I mean, Rachel Riley is one of the all-time great reality TV castings, and I think she really shows on the Traitors once again. Now, again, at first, she kind of was a bit more subdued than she normally is. However, by the end of the season, again, with her rivalries with Kate and with Cody, and then also her exit, I think it really just highlights how great of a reality TV casting choice she is, and someone that I would really just love to see on almost any show. And then the other person here is Stephanie, which Stephanie was fine. I mean, like, Stephanie is someone that has surprisingly come out of nowhere in this last year and has been more active in the Survivor community. Obviously was on Snake in the Grass, now is on the Traitors. And I mean, like, she's really just shown that she's more of the same. Like, I mean, obviously she is older, and I think there is a level of maturity to her now, but outside of that, I really feel like she's the same player she used to be back then. Having some good moments here and there, I think as a whole, still probably not the greatest strategic thinker in the world. Though ends up having a decent role on this season, though again, not as substantial as the other bigger reality stars that I knew coming into this season. But continuing on, we do get the breakfast where the first two to enter are Arie and Arie, which feels very convenient and like kind of feels like production manipulation to a degree, where obviously they make a final two here and decide to banish Christian as he's a liability. Also, while here, we do see Andy talking about how Arie and Arie are their alliance. Again, once again, foreshadowing the fact that Andy is going to be this figure that is going to lose due to being at the end with some traitors. But again, at this point, we're at the final 6, where there's 3 traitors left in the game, all but guaranteeing that a traitor is going to win the game at this point. But this final stretch here still ends up being super interesting, where again, we know that Christian is now on the chopping block with his own traitors wanting to get rid of him, and again, knowing Arie is Arie, at this point, I fully knew exactly what was going to play out here, and I was just so happy to see every second of it play out, really allowing Arie to just show how masterful a player she is. Now here we do get the mission of them having to steal artifacts by going through a laser course. Again, something we've seen on literally both Traitors AU and UK, which again was fine. I think the only like true funny moment here was from Christian messing up after talking up about how great he's going to be, which again feels pretty apt for Christian. Also, we see Kate actually trying again now that she's so close to the end, despite wanting to quit over the last few episodes, so that's kind of humorous as well. But in the lead up to the vote, I mean, we get Quentin and Andy talking to each other, saying that they're confident it isn't Arie, which again ends up backfiring on them. And at the roundtable, either becomes Christian or Kate, with the roundtable ending with Andy throwing Christian under the bus, which finally gives Christian this inclination that he might be booted here. However, I feel like this episode ended on a weird cliffhanger, where we do start the vote reveal, and we do see Arie voting out Christian, which in essence essentially tells Christian that, yeah, he's screwed. However, we for some reason cliffhanger on the Andy vote, which feels weird considering at that point it was obvious Christian was going home, considering Arie voted for him. But either way, we get to the finale, which kind of surprised me how much game there was left in the finale. And it starts off with the final votes for Christian, him being banished, and like Cody, taking it with stride, talking about how Arie and Arie made the best moves for their game. And I guess here we should talk about Christian, who I thought was great casting on this season. I think out of any of the newbies, he's definitely the one that really popped as a character. Now, to be fair, a lot of that's because he was the traitor, and obviously traitors are just in general going to get more screen time. However, he really plays the role so perfectly here, and him being a very sloppy player, one that was so high energy, but still one that like seemingly played a decent game. I mean, despite his sloppiness, like no one really targeted him until, I mean, his mistake in the previous episode, but I mean, it took until the tail end of the game for him to finally get votes, which considering how massive a presence he is, I feel like that is kind of impressive. But with that, we are down to the final 5, where Here we do have Quentin being sussed out of being a traitor due to the fact that he has not voted out a single traitor across this season, which is funny. Though we did get the reveal here, there will be no murder, with the rest of the game being the mission to end all missions, followed by the final 5 roundtable, and then the Fire of Truth ceremony, which is essentially the end of the game, which is essentially the final decision. And we do get this great moment from Arie here, talking about how she's always slipped up at the end of Survivor because of playing emotionally. However, here she has to play strategically this time, something she really ends up following through on. Now, I did find it weird that we still got a traitor meeting during this night, despite no one ending up being murdered, which is like, what was the point of this? Though, here we do also get the setup from Arie about her saying that she doesn't know if she can trust Arie, again, fully setting this up for this glorious outcome to the season. But after this, we get the final breakfast, which was kind of mundane, and then we just eventually rush through the final mission, which I also found really boring. I mean, obviously, this is supposed to be this big moment, this big action set piece, kind of like a challenge of 2 people having to jump out of a helicopter and pass on a code to their other players, and then they get to unlock a boat that they use to find the remaining money, and it's like, yeah, just boring. I really don't care. However, through this mission, it ends up restoring the prize pool to the full $250,000, which kind of makes it pointless. About the other missions throughout the season is, what was the point of gaining money through all of them if you're just going to give them $250,000 anyway, but whatever. But then we get the setup to the final votes here, where Arie is in the middle, and I found this to be a very precarious spot for Arie, where out of nowhere, Andy talks about how them and Quentin are together, thinking that they're faithfuls, which was never really brought up before this, so I always found that really strange. But also we get Arie and Kate wanting to vote out Quentin, and Arie having to pick between the 2 sides. Where here we do see Arie ending up voting out Kate, in turn blindsiding Arie, him now confused, and really ends up alerting him to the fact that Arie has betrayed him, which I will say, I do think this was something that should have backfired on Arie. And as much as I really respect the game of Arie across the season, I feel like this was probably the only point in the season where I was like, I don't know, this was the best move. Now, at the end of the day, Arie ends up taking it with stride, and considering how loyal Andy and Quentin seem to be to her, I don't know if it would have backfired anyway, though I do think this is a very risky move for her to be making in blindsiding her own traitor here without actually taking him out. Though at the same time, I don't know if she would have had the social capital in order to really stir the votes onto Arie without blowing her cover there. So really, I just feel like it was a very precarious position for her to be in, which she obviously ends up overcoming anyway. But here again, we do lose Kate, who was such a great character on this season. Now, I could definitely see people being annoyed with Kate in the sense that obviously she just didn't want to be there, and she was just sabotaging the prize pool on the way and stuff like that. But it's like, I thought she was great TV. Brought this level of drama that you would typically see on these like Bravo reality shows, but into a more strategic game. And yeah, she had these like fun arguments with like Christian and Rachel. She just in general had this fun energy that I do think makes her really great reality TV casting here. But with that, we get to the end of the game, where we get the Fire of Truth, where I will say this is probably something that I do like more than the Traitors AU, where the Traitors UK and US have used this format of this fire ceremony that kind of makes this final decision here have more gravitas to it than just a standard roundtable once again. And really just in general, I think the endgame format of the Traitors is something that is super fascinating, and the fact that by the time of the final 4 here, you can essentially end the game anytime you want. There can be up to 4 winners of the Traitors if all 4 remaining players are faithfuls, though again, that's very unlikely to happen. But still, there can be multiple winners this season. There could be a sole winner. Like, there can be so many different outcomes that can happen here that in a way I do find kind of underwhelming, as I always like having just one winner to point out, though at the same time I think that kind of is what makes the Traitors a bit more unique here in just how many different outcomes there can be for a season. And here I feel like we get the perfect outcome. We're here, obviously Arie now knows that he's in danger, though he still decides to vote to end the game alongside Andy and Quentin, only for us to get the reveal from Arie. As expected, she decides to vote to banish. To which we then get Arie saying that she's doing so because she thinks she deserves it more than Arie, which I will say I don't love the usage of that terminology there, but Arie at this point, again, obviously knows he's screwed, and again, he also just takes it with stride. I do like his reaction here, where, spoiler alert for the Traitors UK, this feels like the complete opposite reaction that happened on that season, to where Arie, instead of even going through the vote, decides to just step down, revealing that he's a traitor on the spot, revealing that he was a late recruit, which I will say all of this should have been a clear giveaway that Arie was also a traitor, in the sense that there was no female traitor, which seems very unlikely. And also the fact that Arie would like just instantly know to do this, though I guess you could say that's because of Arie's great reads, though the fact that she never mentioned this seemingly to Andy and Quentin beforehand, and really just shows you how snowed Arie had everyone in this game, where when again, like, this is revealed, like Andy and Quentin are hugging Arie, like celebrating as if they have the money won at this point, which makes it also tragic when all three then proceed to end the game, with Arie again at this point having played the most masterful traitor game I think we've ever seen, and Arie now has to reveal that she is a traitor, leading to this big shock from Andy and Quentin, like Quentin literally having his mouth open the entire time, and Andy just going into hysterics, and Arie obviously feels guilty here, though I really feel like this is the perfect outcome for this season. Again, now looking back on it, this being the story of Arie Fields, and I think when you take into conjunction Survivor as well, I think this really ends up elevating the season for me, where I really feel like this season would just not be as high in my estimations if Arie did not win this. I feel like if Arie got voted out the last second again, I feel like that would have been extremely tragic. Even she tied with Arie, I feel like that would have been underwhelming, in the sense that it would not be the Arie that we know. I mean, like, I feel like this was just such a perfect outcome for this season that really elevates the season in my eyes. But with that, let's wrap up the review here by talking about the final four players here, starting off with Arie, who, again, was fine. I mean, like, early on the season, he was kind of a nothing figure on the show, though he starts to really pop towards the end. Again, once he becomes a traitor, I think he became good TV. I think his downfall here, Arie turning his back on him, was really fun. And also, I think his graciousness at the end, I think, was pretty interesting to see. Now, I think ideally, I would want him to just go through with the vote off, but outside of that, I think he is a pretty interesting character here, and one that felt like this great final hurdle for Arie leading up to her win. Next up, we got Andy, and again, they were fine too. I mean, I really feel like Andy's a figure that always felt like they were primed up for longevity, though never really got that interesting of content. Now, they were obviously a very sympathetic figure with them having a kid on the way, so that made them likable here, and also made it even more tragic when they eventually lose, though I also felt like we got so much set up to a potential loss here that the outcome for their game wasn't that surprising to me. Next up, we got Quentin, who, again, was just incredible to see how wrong Quentin was at every single opportunity. Like, I find it so funny that there is literally not a single point in this season where Quentin actually makes a correct strategic move for his game. He literally never votes out a single traitor. He never has that correct of a read, and even at points where people are telling him that Cody and Christian are traitors, he still doesn't believe it. I just find Quentin's run in this season super hilarious, and that's what makes him memorable for me. And then obviously we got Arie, and what is there to say? I mean, Arie was already like a truly elite social strategy player in my eyes after watching her on Survivor. Though obviously she always comes up short on Survivor, yet here on the Traitors, she finally made it. She finally won the game. She finally played a game that got her to the end with people who were going to take her to the end. And really, I'll be honest, I didn't know if Arie had it in her anymore. Where, going back to Survivor, I always felt like her strongest games were Panama and Micronesia, and while her games and heroes were villains and Game Changers were solid respectively, especially considering the outcomes of those games, I really don't feel like her Game Changers game in particular was to the same standard as her first few appearances. So to see that she still has this expert level of game ability to her, as we saw here on the Traitors, again, her playing probably the best Traitors game we've ever seen up to this point across the 3 seasons that I have watched. Like, I really was so impressed with how Arie played this, and was so happy to see her finally get a win on a reality show. So that, again, that is the entire season of the Traitors US. A really fun ride, where, again, like, I did think early on it was starting off a bit slower than the first few seasons of the Traitors I watched, where I feel like both of those really captivated me within the first few episodes. I feel like this one took until like around episode 4 or 5 to really pick up. But I really feel like the back half of the season was just super strong, where outside of the challenges, which I still find really boring, I feel like everything else was just really great TV. So many notable storylines, a lot of really surreal moments of seeing these people I've seen on other shows interacting, and for it to be topped with Arie winning this season, playing a really expert game and really showing you how to play as a traitor, I feel like for me that really elevates this season to where I think it's still around the same level as where I would rate the Traitors AU in UK. And I do worry about overall memorability of this season, just due to the fact that, again, like binging it all in a couple days here, I feel like it's the type of thing that's probably going to fade from my mind as time goes on. But really, I feel like I'll always remember this incredible run from Arie that I think will be the main sticking point of this season over time. But with that, that is my review of the Traitors US Season 1. Now the series ends up continuing, I'll probably do coverage of that. Now, also in the reality TV sphere, we did have the Circle Season 5 finish recently, so expect a review of that pretty soon. And beyond that, Australian Survivor Heroes vs. Villains about to start. We also got Survivor 44, Big Brother Canada 11. So again, a lot of stuff coming up, so stay tuned for coverage of those things. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.